It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
When this dead hand moves, the monster created by a man they called Mad is turned loose to strike terror into the hearts of men. To shock women into uncontrolled hysteria.
Elizabeth!
To prey upon the innocence of children. This is the story you've heard about, talked about. The spine-tingling, blood-chilling story that stuns your emotions. Frankenstein.
Don't touch that!
Hey, Psycho Nations, and welcome to Pot. You thought I was going to do it. Hell no. This is the brand new Scarifyer podcast.
Scream for your life!
To a new world of gods and monsters.
Okay, boys and girls, welcome. This is Scarifyer, but not all things have changed. As always,
The Gov is here.
as well as the Ace, and we got a really, really fun show for you today. Today we are going to be doing a watch-along commentary to easily my favorite horror movie and one of my favorite movies of all time,
Oh, sure.
Frankenstein, 1931.
But before we get into that, because this is this week's episode of our podcast, we're going to keep tradition alive by doing the news. So we're heading over to the news desk right now with Ace.
All right, for the news this week in horror, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, is number one at the box office. It debuted at $49 million, knocking out Disney's Aladdin. Will Smith could not take Godzilla, apparently.
I guess not. Though, I don't know if anyone else can take him either, because I think they're going to take him out soon. I guess this movie, even though it's number one, had a decent opening number. They're starting to get worried. I mean, there's a lot of reasons you could go into, but it's not making the money that they wanted for this great grand monsterverse. Though next year we are getting King Kong versus Godzilla or whatever they're going to call it. But Warner Brothers is getting nervous with this monsterverse.
Well, we'll get into Warner Brothers later. Moving on. Ghostbusters. Who remembers the 2009 video game?
I do.
I do too. It's probably my favorite game next to Mario Brothers.
Wow.
Well, that is getting remastered and re-released for its 10-year anniversary. And it will be able to be played on current generation consoles as well as PC via stream. There's no release date as of right yet as to when the remastered version of Ghostbusters of the game will come out, but we'll all be looking for that, and I'll keep all you guys updated on when that is out.
And let's be honest, guys, that is the real Ghostbusters 3.
Absolutely. And moving on to something more current with what we've been doing the last few weeks with the show, we're going to talk a little Child's Play. in the news. But not the remake Child's Play.
Okay.
I am talking about the TV series by Don Mancini.
All right.
So, in an recent interview with Bleeding Coal, Brad Dourif has stated that Don Mancini's Child's Play TV show for the Sci-Fi Channel is happening, and he himself is involved.
Didn't we already know that, though? I mean, we knew that Brad Dourif was going to be involved. Is this the official green light?
This is coming from Brad Dourif, who heard it from Mancini's mouth. The show is happening and is coming in 2020.
Okay.
For the Sci-Fi Network.
Okay.
So that show is happening despite the remake.
All right. All more power to them.
Okay, moving on to another classic horror franchise that's getting the reboot. Candyman.
Yep. Jordan Peele.
Jordan Peele's Candyman. This is some big news. Tony Todd will be in Jordan Peele's Candyman.
Nice.
That was released this week. And as we know, Yahya Abdul-Mateen, you might know him as Black Manta from Aquaman. He was announced to be playing the title role of Candyman earlier this year. However, the director of the new Candyman, Nia DaCosta, has recently said to Collider that this was slightly misleading. That Abdul-Mateen is not replacing Tony Todd. But that was all they would give away.
So that's interesting.
They said it was slightly misleading.
What could that imply?
I mean, that can be a whole bunch of things. It could mean two different versions of Candyman. It could be a passing of the torch of Candyman. Even though he says he's not replacing him, maybe by the end he has. Who knows?
Son of Candyman?
Obviously, you know. So, not much being said, but a lot of teases there. And for those of you who don't know, that Candyman is set to be released June 12th, 2020. And as always with the news, we usually have one article that just pisses us right the fuck off.
Oh my god.
And this is this week. Swamp Thing for the DC Universe channel, after one episode, canceled.
What the fuck?
And here it gets better. It's not canceled because of ratings. It's not canceled because of negative fan reaction, because we all love the fucking show. The first episode kicked fucking ass.
Yeah,
This show is being canceled because Warner Brothers and AT&T just didn't like it.
Oh my god. This is such bullshit.
So, here's my gripe with Warner Brothers, because I've always been a DC guy.
Right.
So we're going to go way back to Superman Returns. Warner Brothers, you fucked up Superman Returns by making a Christopher Reeve Superman without Christopher Reeve. And then you took one of the most anticipated superhero, a movie that people waited years to see, that they wanted for, that they asked you for, the Green Lantern. And you made the most boring piece of shit you could ever think of. And then you tried to go nut for nut with Marvel without having any content, and gave us a shitty Batman vs. Superman and a shitty Justice League. So you've ruined all that. Now you've given us something that we like, that we're all about, that we enjoy, and you're taking it away because you don't like it?
This is bullshit. This
what the good fuck?
This really pisses me off because I'm a huge Swamp Thing fan, and I've been waiting for a very long time for something Swamp Thing to hit mainstream live action, preferably. And no, fucking Justice League Dark, that animated piece of shit, does not count. No, yeah, where he's there for 5 seconds and then he dies. What the fuck? Anyway, for those of you who haven't seen the first episode, it is currently streaming on the DC Universe app. This being a recording on Friday means the second episode has been released. Can't wait to watch it. The first episode was so good, and it got the fans really excited. It got comic book fans excited. It got Swamp Thing fans excited. It also got horror fans excited because they're making it like a horror movie or a horror series, whatever you want to call it. And it had legitimate tension and jump scares, and the plot flowed, and great characters. You, in the span of one episode, you like Alec Holland. For how brief he is on the screen before he turns into Swamp Thing. Spoiler alert, Alec Holland is Swamp Thing. But you grow attached to him. And to see what happens to him, it affects you. And then when you see Swamp Thing for the first time played great by Derek Mears.
Horror fans, he's Jason.
From the 2009 requel. And I was so excited. I've heard the rumblings that this show was in trouble from the get-go, meaning that they were originally slated for 13 episodes. It got cut down to 10 episodes, and the reason was because this AT&T Warner Brothers merger deemed Warner Media did not like the creative direction of the show, so they shortened its runtime in terms of the series episodes. And now they're just flat out canceling it after one season. What the fuck is going on here? And there was a report earlier today or late last night saying that it was governmental budget concerns that led to the canceling. This is their official statement, Warner Brothers, which was immediately debunked by the North Carolina Film Office, which they quoted to say, North Carolina's budget discussions had nothing to do with Swamp Thing's cancellation.
Warner Brothers, you're killing the lifelong DC fans. You're sinking your own ship because you're trying to force people to like what you like. You're Vince McMahoning this, goddammit.
Hey, pal, what are you doing? I like titties and I like chocolate.
Pretty much. I mean, instead of giving the fans what they want, you're forcing them to take what you think they want.
However, I did read last night that there is some hope in this mess. HBO and the CW are both looking into options to purchasing Swamp Thing so they can continue with the second season.
I mean, I certainly hope so. That sounds like a long shot.
Fuck them. Let's watch Frankenstein.
Visit your local video retailer and ask for the Universal Studios Monsters Classic Collection. Classic monster titles with a haunting new look at a price to die for.
All right, here we go. Our first watch-along commentary on Scarifyer. Once again, I want to tell you that we are no longer Pods and Monsters. For the story on that, you can head over to social media on our Facebook, on our Instagram, where you'll find a video of myself and Ace explaining the entire situation on everything that went down and why we had to rebrand. Should make a great movie one day. And also, real quick, I just want to say you might notice that I'm starting to lose my voice. I'm going to try my best to stick along with this commentary. So I just wanted to give you a heads up if you notice. If you haven't noticed, I'm totally fine. There's nothing wrong.
Okay, and just to add on the whole Scarifyer thing, it's a cooler name.
Yeah.
And again, we appreciate and we love all your support. And with that, Gov, count us down.
All right, so make sure you have your DVD player, your Blu-ray player, your Google machine, your Amazon Prime streaming, for you hipsters, your VHS player, set and queued and ready to go, because we're going to start in 3, 2, 1, play.
And it's a Universal picture, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you know, we are watching this off Amazon Prime right at the moment. So first you get the updated Universal logo.
And there's that prologue.
This is Edward Van Sloan. He will be playing Dr. Waldman.
Yep, Dr. Vollman.
A little bit later in the film. Universal did this as a promo stunt to build some frights and get people jittery before the movie even started.
Mm-hmm. I guess they thought that, they would have some legitimate problems with people being too terrified for this film, or from this film.
Deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. even horrifying. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain...
It's worth noting that he did a similar prologue for Dracula.
No, it was an epilogue. It happened at the end of the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'm curious why they've never released that.
Well, here we go. The opening card to Frankenstein. Again, another rarity in 1931. Original music for the opening title.
The other monster hit of that year was, in fact, Dracula from February, and they, I believe they used music from Swan Lake for their opening sequence. It was very popular back in the day to take already established stage adaptations and turn them into screenplays. And this one, the Peggy Webling play, as you can see credited there.
And our director, James Whale, the great James Whale. And here's the player card with all of our actors, and famously the monsters played by a question mark.
Which I believe was a tradition that was set in the theater. They used to do that with the playbills.
And here we are at the graveyard scene. Something very, very risque for 1931. You did not see portrayals of death quite like this. This was really pushing the censors for that time. From the weeping widows
to the statue of death
of death himself. Here's our first glimpse of Dwight Fry and Colin Clive.
This would not be the only scene that runs into censor troubles in this film.
Absolutely not. And here we go. Here we see the Undertaker begin to push dirt over an open grave. Again, something very tame for 2019, but for 1931, hearing the thud of the dirt on top of the casket, absolutely never seen, never heard before, pushing every censor possible.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, just throw it on the grave, whatever. No big deal.
No respect.
No.
No respect.
No.
Now, come on.
The religious imagery, too.
And again, here we're about to see such taboo grave robbing for 1931.
Oh, yeah.
Just unheard of. And we're going to see Colin Clive literally throw dirt in the face of death. Unbelievable.
Now, common debate on that was that intentional or just something that happened?
I have to say it was intentional, because if you see the first shovel of dirt goes forward, and then the second one is right at the statue of the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
Here it comes. He's just resting, waiting for a new life to come.
And again, here we go. About to come up to just more things that were just completely unheard of in 1931.
Oh, my God.
A man hanging from the gallows.
Yeah.
And then we're going to watch Dwight Fry, a.k.a. Fritz, climb up to the gallows, cut the body down. You hear the thud of the body. Just, again, tame for 19... tame for 2019, but really, really pushing the envelope for 1931.
I mean, even just what he just did, he pushed the body and just we're watching it swing in the background. Dwight Frye was a magnificent character actor who never got the credit that he deserved.
Certainly not.
Between his performance in this and then previously in the year with Dracula as Renfield, he became an icon into himself, and he never got the respect, and he was kind of reduced to bit roles in other Universal films, including the Frankenstein sequels. He shows up in Bride as another like lab stooge, but with an even less of a character. And some say that he's somewhere in Son of Frankenstein, but I've yet to really spot him. And unfortunately, he was a guy who never got the credit and died way too young in his life.
You know, here we are in the university scene again. More pushing the envelope, seeing a dead body, brains.
There's Edward Van Sloan, who we saw in the prologue, now playing his character, Dr. Waldman.
Come to my attention at the university, and here the abnormal brain of the typical criminal. Observe, ladies and gentlemen, the scarcity of convolutions on the frontal lobe, as compared to that of the normal brain, and the distinct degeneration of the middle frontal lobe. All of these degenerate characteristics check amazingly with the case history of the dead man before us, whose life was one of brutality, of violence, and murder.
Bit dated science, but...
Well, 1931, man.
Yeah. Where, violent behavior must be attributed to brain abnormality.
And here goes old clumsy Fritz dropping the regular brain.
You idiot.
And this isn't foreshadowing or anything. We know where this is headed.
That's right, he grabbed the abnormal brain. Very interesting way to open a scene with nothing but close-ups, and then you get the wide establishing shot.
3 fast close-ups of technique James will use very often. Here we see Meg Clark and John Bowles. Meg Clark plays Elizabeth, and John Bowles plays Victor.
Which is odd because for some reason they changed the names. They switched them from the original book. Because in the book, it's Victor Frankenstein, not Henry Frankenstein.
Well, Henry's his friend in the book.
Exactly.
They swap them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I am living in an abandoned old watchtower close to the town of Goldstadt. Only my assistant is here to help me with my experiments.
Oh, his experiments.
Yes, that's what frightens me. The very day we announced our engagement, he told me of his experiments. He said he was on the verge of a discovery so terrific that he doubted his own sanity.
Now, this movie has a very interesting production in terms of James Whale nor Boris Karloff were supposed to be involved with it. Originally, directing duties were on to Robert Florey, and then horror superstar Bela Lugosi was set to play the monster. Supposedly, there is also test footage of this pairing. It hasn't seen the light of day yet, but apparently it was a laughable screen test, and some major recasting and major changing of players ensued. But one of the bigger debates among the horror community, and especially with classic horror films, was, did Bela get fired, or did he turn the role down? I mean, honestly, I can't foresee somebody ever turning a lead role down, no matter how big they think they are. Because I guess at the time, Bela felt that the monster was beneath him, if I'm getting that right. So he wanted to do more interesting characters. I personally think that he was just replaced after they saw the screen test. But some people do debate that.
Well, Bela Lugosi always saw himself as a Valentino-type actor anyway. He didn't like wearing the heavy makeup, even though he would go on to play Frankenstein in later years.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, his second biggest part, Igor.
Yeah.
But at the time, the man had a head on him.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be bothered, as he put it, as a mute, lumbering stuntman.
Right.
Under hundreds of pounds of makeup. He thought he was too good looking and too dashing for that.
I mean, granted, I've heard that the script was entirely different. It was a very different script where the monster was described as just this
certainly not.
hulking brute, walking around the lab.
Oh, no, it's well documented that Bela Lugosi was not presented the script that Boris Karloff was.
Yeah, or the makeup.
Absolutely not.
Or the makeup on Bela was really bad.
Supply him with other bodies, and we were not to be too particular as to where and how we got them. I told him that his demands were unreasonable, and so he left the university to work unhampered. He found what he needed elsewhere.
One of the few things that does happen the way it is in the Mary Shelley novel is the fallout between Waldman and Frankenstein.
Yes.
First to destroy it, then recreate it. There you have his mad dream.
Can we go to him?
You will not be very welcome.
Oh, what does that matter? I must see him. Dr. Belknap, you have influence with Henry. Won't you come with us?
I am sorry, but Herr Frankenstein is no longer my pupil.
But he respects you. Won't you help us to take him away?
Very well, Fräulein. I've warned you, but if you wish it, I will go.
The infamous set is upon us.
The legendary Frankenstein Laboratory.
Mm-hmm. The famous electronic equipment designed and created by Henry Strickfaden that you can see in dozens.
Kenneth Strickfaden.
Oh, okay. Sorry. That you can see in dozens of other films.
Yes, these sets were reused and reprocessed for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
They popped up just about everywhere, especially in Universal horror movies.
If this storm develops as I hope, you will have plenty to be afraid of before the night's over. Go on, fix the electrodes.
Again, very different from the original text, using electronic impulses from a storm to reanimate the corpse. Would you say that this is the first medium that used that? Because it certainly wasn't in the book. I don't know if any of the other stage plays prior used that.
I know the Thomas Edison version used something similar. It really doesn't, lead way to electricity particularly, but he's in some sort of vat and switches are being thrown and
Yeah, more of an elixir type thing.
Here we get our first look at Boris Karloff. Even though his face is covered up, we get the image of the famous flathead.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it. The brain of a dead man, waiting to live again in a body I made with my own hands.
Here you get those, very controversial themes of man trying to emulate God, and also a little bit of Faust in there that got the film into some trouble back in the day. This film was not without its controversy.
Good. 15 minutes, the storm should be at its height. Then we'll be ready. What's that? There's someone there. Quiet. Send them away. Nobody must come here.
What a bunch of jerks that crashed the party.
I know.
Whoever it is, don't get them in. Leave them to me.
Very popular in terms of photography was that German expressionism. You can see it all over.
Absolutely.
You
Very gothic. Very, very gothic.
see it all over all the Universal classic films. One being more evident is like the Black Cat. And this one, yeah. A lot of shadows.
You can't see it. Go away.
Another thing worth mentioning is watching and listening. The lack of music,
Oh,
the
sure.
lack of score, really gives this film an eerie quality to it. It really gets you sucked into the elements of what's going on around these characters.
I mean, sure. I mean, at the time, talkies were still pretty young, and most theaters weren't equipped for with the sound equipment. So a lot of these movies were converted into silent films, even though they weren't. Dracula is another perfect example of that. Watch Dracula. There is no music in Dracula.
No, none at all.
And there's
None at all.
And there's barely any sound effects. But that's what gives it its eeriness. That's what gives it its creepiness. Is just hearing the natural elements.
I'm quite all right. Truly I am. Oh, can't you see I mustn't be disturbed? You'll ruin everything. My experiment is almost completed.
Wait a moment. I understand.
It seems like this, like that, where Colin Clive can play such a sympathetic character, but he's also mad, and it's like turning on a switch.
We'll see whether I'm crazy or not. Come on out.
Well, from what I read, Colin Clive's performance really reflected his personal, especially in this movie, his personal life. Colin Clive was very tormented and diseased with alcoholism, which led to a very early death right after The Bride of Frankenstein in 1937.
Yeah, that's when he died, 37. Because Bride of Frankenstein was 35. But
It was after.
Yeah,
Not long after.
Yeah. Yeah, Colin Clive was described by James Whale as Jekyll and Hyde, meaning Jekyll when he was sober and Hyde when he wasn't. And you can see that in his performance, and his great performance as Frankenstein.
Sit down. You too, Elizabeth. Please.
moment ago, you said I was crazy. Tomorrow we'll see about that.
Don't touch that!
I'm sorry, Doctor, but I insist.
I never liked the Waldman character in this movie. Here he is. He's over there messing with his shit and looking under the curtain and stuff like that. And then later he's like insisting on killing the monster. And it's like, what the hell's your problem, dude? Just because he did it when you know you couldn't?
The ultraviolet ray, which you said was the highest color in the spectrum. You were wrong. Here in this machinery, I have gone beyond that. I have discovered the great ray that first brought life into the world. Oh, and your proof? Tonight you will
So back to Colin Clive. Yes, he passed away in Los Angeles on June 25th, 1937.
and then a human heart, which I kept
His final performance being in an RKO production of The Woman I Love or The Woman Between.
on that body and endow it with life.
And you really believe that you can bring life to the dead?
That body is not dead. It has never lived. I created it. I made it with my own hands from the bodies I took from graves, from the gallows, anywhere. Go and see for yourself. You too. Yeah? Hey? Quite a good scene, isn't it? One man crazy, three very sane spectators.
And here we go.
It's really hard to want to talk over a scene like this, it being one of the greatest scenes ever filmed in cinema history. The creation of the Frankenstein monster.
I mean, often imitated but never duplicated. I mean, there you just him laying on the slab, you can see like the gaunt and the skeletal kind of structure that Boris had at the time.
And that is Boris Karloff on that table. That is not a dummy.
Yeah. I think this is a much more effective reanimation scene than we got in Bride. Only because Bride, I think they showed too much. I liked this implying what's happening up there. It just shows a couple flashes of lightning that it's actually going into the monster instead of actually seeing it.
Well, at the same time, Bride of Frankenstein, you obviously had a lot bigger budget, and you could...
Well, sure, but like it's much more effective because, as you can see, when the body's being lowered down, we don't know if it worked or not until the famous moment, which is right here.
It's the most iconic moment in horror history, people.
And look how dedicated to this Colin Clive is.
Followed by one of the most controversial lines in cinema history.
Which was often cut out of the film. I don't think we saw that re-entered into the film until the 90s somewhere.
The 80s or the 90s.
Yeah, I think with the MCA VHS releases, they finally put that line back.
Don't worry about it, Baron.
But even still in promotional materials, they kept it out.
You two have it all arranged, haven't you? You think I'm an idiot, don't you? But I'm not.
Here we see 75-year-old Frederick Kerr playing Baron Frankenstein.
Comic relief for the movie, definitely.
You're quite mistaken, Baron. What's the matter with my son? What's he doing?
He's completing his experiments, that's all.
Why does he go messing round an old ruined windmill when he has a decent house, a bath, good food and drink, and a darn pretty girl to come back to? Will you tell me that?
Baron, you don't understand.
I understand perfectly well. There's another woman, and you're afraid to tell me. What sort of experiments these must be? How do you know?
If you please, Herr Baron, the Burgomaster.
Well, tell him to go away.
But he said it's important.
Nothing the Burgomaster...
So should we talk about briefly how dear old Boris got onto this movie?
Good day, Herr Baron.
Sure. Oh, enter Lionel Barrymore.
If it's trouble, go away. I've trouble enough. Oh, there's no trouble, sir. What do you mean, no trouble? There's nothing but trouble. I brought you these flowers,
Thank you, Herr Vogel.
both in my private and official capacities as Burgomaster. Yes, we know all about that, but what do you want?
Just like a rich guy to tell a politician to stuff it.
When will the wedding be, if you please? Unless Henry comes to his senses, there'll be no wedding at all. But, Herr Baron, the village is already prepared. Well, tell him to unprepare. Oh, but such a lovely bride. Such a fine young man, the very image of his father. Heaven forbid. But, sir, everything is ready. I know that. Don't keep on saying so, you idiot. There's nothing to cry about. Good day, Mr. Good day, Herr Moritz. Good day, Herr Vogel. Good day, Herr Baron. And good riddance to you. There you are. You see what I did? The whole village is kept waiting, the bride is kept waiting, and I am kept waiting. Henry must come home if I have to fetch him myself.
The Baron's about to whoop some ass.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff and nonsense. What about
Stubborn nonsense.
There is another woman, and I'm going to find her.
Here we see Dr. Frankenstein basking in the glory of his success.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Waldman, obviously concerned as anybody would be in their right mind after witnessing what he had just...
Oh, sure. Very troubled, Dr. Waldman. Now, this scene's interesting because apparently it was not in the shooting script. So historians believe it was added during production, and not only added but written by James Whale himself, because it wasn't in the shooting script, and obviously somebody wanted it, and they feel like it was James Whale. Colin's speech right here.
But if you talk like that, people call you crazy. Well, if I could discover just one of these things, what eternity is, for example, I wouldn't care if they did think I was crazy. You're young, my friend. Your success has intoxicated you. Wake up and look facts in the face.
I feel like they really wanted to villainize the monster early on by, first of all, calling him a monster, because in the novel he's referred to as the creature, never a monster. And this whole explanation of giving him a criminal brain. I feel like they were looking for justification of some of the things he does, the people he killed and stuff like that, but I don't think they were counting on Karloff playing the character with such pathos.
Absolutely not.
That, is he doing these things because he's a criminal or he has a criminal brain, or is he just doing them because he's a dead man who was literally brought back to life?
Well, either way, Karloff took this role and made it his own and did something that I don't think anybody at the time could have done with this character.
Mm-hmm.
My father never believes in anyone. I've got to experiment further. He's only a few days old, remember. So far, he's been kept in complete darkness.
As we start to hear the heavy footsteps of the Frankenstein monster about to make his entrance.
an almost comical fashion to enter in backwards, as we're about to see.
Oh, I don't think that's comical. I think that's keeping the suspense build up because you don't know what you're about to see.
Right, but why would he walk into a room backwards?
Here we see the slow turn unveiling Jack Pierce's iconic Frankenstein monster makeup worn by Boris Karloff, and a classic 3-shot close-up by James Whale. Karloff actually had a bridge that he would remove from his mouth to give that cheek its sunken look.
And suck in the side of his face, and then they would shade over it.
Such an iconic makeup. Even today, when you think of the Frankenstein monster, you think of the heavy boots, the flat head, the bolts in the neck, and the scar. Bolts, which are actually electrodes, but that's nitpicking.
Right.
But today, over getting close to 85 years,
Yeah.
still, this is the image of the Frankenstein monster you still know, recognize, and remember today.
Oh, sure. I mean,
It's
any little kid who says, I'm going to be Frankenstein for Halloween, they dress like Boris. You know, with a flat head, green skin, wearing a corpse suit.
Look at that face. Only a mother could love that face.
I don't know. I love him.
This is where we see Karloff at his best. This is a talking movie, and Karloff is giving us the silent performance of a lifetime.
I mean, what do you think he's doing here? Is he trying to grab the light, or is he trying to almost say to God, take me back?
Well, I mean, you can interpret it in however you want to interpret. I interpret it as he doesn't know what it is, and he's trying to get it. He has no idea what he's looking at. As he said, this is the first time he's ever been exposed to any sort of light.
Yeah.
You look at Karloff's eyes. That was a suggestion by him during the makeup process with Jack Pierce. He originally didn't have his eyes built up that bad. But after a few tests, he felt that the monster's eyes looked too alive. So what Jack Pierce would end up doing was layering his eyelids with mortician's
wax, yeah. I mean, it was a brilliant effect. There's often some debate on who actually designed the makeup. There was a lot of people who took credit for it back in the day.
Well, just like anything else, I'm sure it was a collaboration by all.
Yeah.
You know, being such an iconic, everybody wants their piece of the pie, so they're going to say that they did this or that. But,
yeah,
85 years later, who cares? Bottom line is we got it.
It's just funny because it goes to that expression of success has a lot of fathers, failure's an orphan.
Absolutely.
So again, they worked really hard to vilify the monster, but who wouldn't go nuts after this? I mean, why do you have to have a criminal brain? And
even so, and not to beat a dead horse, here again, more censor issues. Seeing the monster whipped and chained and tormented, the close-ups of his face in the fire, being tortured, stuff that just was not.
I mean, that shot of Fritz with the flame in front of him.
This was terrifying for 1931. You never saw anything like this.
It's bold decisions made by a bold guy, James Whale. He loved pushing the boundaries, and that's ultimately what got him kicked out of Hollywood.
again, we see another body hanging in the background.
And this also is the reason why a lot of people believe that Fritz is in fact Igor, who appears in the third film, Son of Frankenstein.
Even though they clearly say he's not.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much retconning in Son of Frankenstein, it's hard to keep track.
Well, I mean, we can probably do 3 episodes on the production of Son of Frankenstein and not even scratch the surface. It was such a troubled production.
Well, there is something interesting coming about Son of Frankenstein. Stay tuned on Scarifyer.
What can we do? Kill it. As would any savage animal. We must overpower him first. Get me a hide done.
Again, referring to the monster as a savage animal. What did he do? He took out a guy who was waving a torch in front of his face. Who wouldn't do that?
Yes, kill it, kids. It's very strong. Half grain solution. Good. Now then. Now you stand there. When he goes toward you, I will make the injection in his back. Ready? Yes.
About to see some more controversial imagery. Again, tame for 2019, but for 1931, a close-up of a syringe going in a back. The monster strangling Dr. Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm. There it is.
Took about 3.5 hours for Jack Pierce to make Boris up like that.
Mm-hmm.
And about another 2.5 to take it all off.
Mm-hmm. This is a super old school applying makeup. There was no foam rubber, no latex.
Cotton and glue, boys.
Yep, you were looking
Cotton
at
and glue.
spirit gum, cotton, collodion, built up, painted, built up.
Karloff had scars on his neck from the glue that held the electrodes onto his neck.
Mm-hmm.
Henry, hurry upstairs and get that blood off your face before your father and Elizabeth get here.
Karloff came to the picture, I believe, when James Whale saw him on the Universal lot, if I'm getting that correct. He saw him in the commissary, I believe, and he was obsessed with the bone structure of his face.
No, well, I mean, Karloff, at the time, he was a struggling actor. He had appeared in over 40 movies, but nothing that broke him, nothing that was making him money. He was starving. He was living meal to meal,
Yeah.
paycheck to paycheck, and he had a very skinny, very cadaverous look to him, and that fascinated James Whale.
Mm-hmm.
Little did James Whale know that he also had an incredible actor attached to that skeletal body.
Exactly. I mean, one thing that could always be said about Karloff is his perseverance, because, as you said, he was a bit player in many movies prior to getting his big break with Frankenstein.
Oh, he was 41 during the making of this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And before he even got a chance to be a bit player or an extra, he was hauling lumber to the lots and just trying to be around the industry to get his foot in the door, and he never stopped nor complained.
Never give up on your dreams, boys and girls.
No matter-
Never give up on your dreams.
Exactly. And if you're one of those people who are like sitting around saying, like, I'm too old, I can't do this anymore, as Ace put it, Karloff was 41 till he got his big break. And what a break did he get.
Elizabeth. Come in.
to you.
It's all my fault. Get him on the sofa. Oh, my fault. You got it, Randy?
You see how
Brandy cures all.
Yeah.
People, brandy cures all.
it's a great setup though of like how Victor's been living for months and months.
Now drink. Drink this. There, that's better. I'm going to take you home with me.
Fuck aspirin.
Yeah, no.
Brandy, people. Brandy.
My experiments, we will preserve them. And hell, I will see that it is painlessly destroyed.
Yeah, right.
Yes, leave it all to me. Poor Fritz. Oh, my fault.
You're gonna dissect him like he's fucking E.T.
You must come home until you get well again. You'll soon feel better when you get out of here.
Here we got Boris on the dissection table.
I want to point out again, going a little bit back to the makeup, that the monster was never intended to be green, even though they did make him green. But it was because they knew they were shooting in black and white, and green gives off a very pale, death-like complexion.
Here we see Dr. Waldman, Edward Von Sloan, about to do the dirty work. And we're going to see, in my opinion, still one of the most creepy, chilling scenes in cinema, even by today's standard, when you slowly see the monster's hand slowly go up the doctor's back and grabbing him by the neck. Super, super creepy.
Edward Von Sloan was the hero of Dracula, made it to the end. Not so much here.
A fun fact, while Boris was walking around on the back lot, Carl Lumley made Jack Pierce cover his head in a burlap sack so he wouldn't scare the secretaries on the Universal backlot. You can find pictures of Karloff being escorted around by Jack Pierce. I'll try to post that on social media.
Mm-hmm. Oh, in the lavish lifestyle of Victor Frankenstein.
It's like heaven being with you again.
Heaven wasn't so far away all the time, you know.
I know. But I didn't realize it. My word. Those horrible days.
Mae Clark was recast in the sequel. They went with completely British actors for the follow-up, which a lot of people thought was a mistake, but
When will our wedding be?
Well, we'll save Bride of Frankenstein for another day.
yeah.
Oh, a lot to dig in there.
I guess what my point is, like, she gives a very solid performance, and I'm almost sorry to see her go.
For 3 generations, these orange blossoms have been worn at our weddings. Your great-grandfather wore this, Henry. Looks as good as new now, eh? And here's one to make the best man look still better. 30 years ago, I placed this on your mother's head, Henry. Today you'll make me very happy by doing the same for Elizabeth. And I hope in 30 years' time, a youngster of yours will be carrying on the tradition. now, how about a little drink, eh?
Oh, more alcohol.
My grandfather bought this wine.
See, people, not much has changed since 1931.
My grandmother wouldn't let him drink it. Oh, bless her heart. Yes, to a very good health. Well, you all four, yes, come on. Here's a health to a son of the House of Frankenstein.
Movie unintentionally inspired the title for the 5th movie in the series.
Give the servants some champagne. This stuff's wasted on them.
Classy. Classy, Baron.
Go on, mop it up. It'll do you good. House of Frankenstein. Take it.
You just tell us we're getting the cheap shit.
I'll be off about your business.
It's our first look at the Little Europe set on the Universal Back Collection, which is still there today, and you drive through on the Universal Tour in Hollywood.
Used a number of productions for Universal and even more in their monster films. I believe you saw it in 2010's Wolfman remake.
Absolutely.
Yeah, arguably the best part of the movie was when you got to revisit this set.
You all very much indeed. I'm very pleased to see you all, and I hope there's plenty of beer. At all events, there's lots more where that came from.
Again, more shots of Little Europe.
Tracking shots, which very rare in the day because a lot of times you get very still frames, very immobile frames. But here we go from one tracking shot to another of the monster in the woods. Little Maria.
Yes, probably the second most important and most iconic scene of the movie here with the monster and Little Maria.
Mm-hmm.
I'm too busy, darling. You stay and play with the kitty, huh?
Bye, Daddy.
Goodbye. Be a good girl now.
Come on, kitty.
Again, adding to the Little Europe, it was originally built in 1919 for the Lon Chaney movie. Excuse me. I believe it was The Miracle Man.
Oh, yeah.
Which would go on to be seen again in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, where Lon Chaney would be whipped as Quasimodo.
Mm-hmm.
But here we go. Again, iconic, not only horror cinema, but just movie cinema here. The interaction between the Frankenstein monster and the little girl, Maria. Frankenstein. Boris Karloff protested doing this scene to James Whale because he did not...
Would you like one of my flowers?
He felt it would be more effective to just to show the monster sympathy side playing with Maria rather than drowning her.
Mm-hmm.
And James Whale, being the director, not only won the argument, but made the good point that this was part of the tragedy of the monster, not knowing what he was doing, not knowing what he was capable of, and Karloff eventually bought into it.
Mm-hmm. And it is an important scene, and I think James Whale was right to argue that with Karloff. The innocence in the scene and the...
Just a beautiful scene, beautiful acting, beautiful filmmaking right here.
And the actress playing Little Marie was not afraid of Boris at all, which is interesting. One of the few people who weren't.
Many kids weren't.
Yeah.
And then prior to the 80s, the film would be cut right here before the girl goes into the lake.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually made, due to censors, they would cut it. You would see Boris reaching for Little Maria, and then it would cut.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing you would see was the dead girl going through Little Europe, being carried by her father. And honestly, in your head, that's more terrifying than actually seeing her get thrown into the lake.
Oh, sure.
Because now
sure.
your mind plays with what did the monster actually do to the little girl.
Yeah, exactly. Did he strangle her? Did he drown her? Exactly. I was about to say, so up until the 80s, somewhat, Boris got what he wanted, but not really.
No.
Because that is much more, that is way more, the implications, yeah.
I say it often when I'm describing horror and talking horror movies that your mind is way darker than anything you could possibly see on screen.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's what you don't see that's it's terrifying.
Your head will take you to places you don't even think you could go.
Mm-hmm.
So again, to see the Frankenstein monster reach for the little girl,
with a smile on his face.
With a smile on his face.
Yeah.
Have the scene cut, and then the next thing you see is the girl dead in the arms of her father.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, your head can go to some pretty dark places.
Oh, yeah.
What is it?
I'm so glad you're safe.
Safe? Of course I'm safe. But you look worried. Is anything wrong?
No, forget my foolishness. It was just a mood. There's nothing the matter.
Of course there isn't.
Henry, I'm afraid. Terribly afraid. Where's Dr. Val? Why is he late for the wedding?
Oh, he's always late. He'll be here soon.
Something is going to happen. I feel it. I can't get it out of my mind.
You're just nervous. All the excitement.
You got a little bit of a plot hole here. I mean, there's a few plot holes in this movie that I don't even know if we have the time to go through. But how did the monster find his way to Frankenstein's castle or mansion or house, whatever you want to call it? You know what I mean? And he comes in through the window, as we'll see in a few minutes, and like there's really no reason for him to be there or know whose house that is.
I mean, that's true, but again, I don't think those little plot holes really affect the final product of the movie.
No, I mean, you do have to kind of, especially when you're approaching the climax of the film, kind of have to say, all right, we have to progress here.
I mean, again, the scene right there, how did they know that Dr. Volman had been murdered?
Right. Yeah, who went back up to the laboratory?
He's been seen in the hills terrorizing the mountainside. He's in the house. He's upstairs.
As we approach the scene where Karloff stalks May Clark in the room, going off a story I read that May Clark was so scared of Boris and makeup, she was having the toughest time getting through the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So what Boris Karloff did was he made a deal with her. He said, if you start to get scared, look towards my offstage little finger,
mm-hmm.
and I'll be wiggling it.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you'll just know that it's Boris and makeup, and that's how they played the scene. If you look closely, you can see a little bit of wiggling on Karloff's far hand.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how they got through, again, another iconic scene in this film as the monster stalks Elizabeth.
Oh, yep. I believe Gregory Manx said that when he interviewed May Clark.
I believe that was one of his books I was reading when I read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys are listening, if you're interested in knowing more of the backstory of this movie and not just this movie, but all the classic monsters, I strongly suggest any literature by David J. Scull and Gregory Minks. They knew their stuff. They have connections, especially David J. Scull. Hollywood Gothic and The Monster Show, incredible reads.
Absolutely.
And on the history of horror.
Yeah, and you're talking about guys who directly inspired us and the reason why we have this show. Great guys who definitely know their stuff. Here we go. Like, again, more taboo. Who would have the balls in 1931 to have such a long shot of a grieving man carrying his dead daughter like this?
Absolutely.
Holy shit, this shot does not stop.
Again, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I mean, again, this just like tore apart the censors in 31. There was no official rating system at the time for movies, but man.
Yeah, there was no MPAA either. Yeah. There were censor boards, but
a lot of theaters refused to play movies like this because they push such moral boundaries. And
to Universal's credit, to the Laemmle's credit, they
stood by it.
They stood by it, and they played into it by, this was a huge publicity stunt film. They would plant people in the audiences to faint, and they would put ambulances outside of movie houses and theaters and stuff like that just to freak out the moviegoers, so they question, what kind of movie am I getting themselves into?
Just looks at me and says nothing. This man is your man. She'll be all right. Our wedding day. The wedding will only be postponed a day at most. A day? I wonder. What do you mean? There can be no wedding while this horrible creation of mine is still alive. I made him with these hands, and with these hands I'll destroy him. I must find him. I'll go with you. No. You stay here and look after Elizabeth. I leave her in your care, whatever happens. You understand?
You fool. Do you know who you're talking to?
I also read somewhere that Victor John Bulls was actually a spy during World War I.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Now, is that real, or is that another one of those? Errol Flynn was a Nazi sympathizer.
No, I believe it's real. Because I did read it in a biography or in a backstory of production of this movie. I just where it was from is slipping my mind right now, and I'm trying to focus on the movie so we can give these fine people a good commentary and not search around on my phone too much.
Yeah. Again, another staple in Gothic horror films has been,
The Mob.
Been created here. The Mob with their
Torches.
pitchforks and yep. The very trappings that make these classics.
Again, more great shots of Little Europe.
I wish they would focus a little bit more on the monster, especially like what he's been doing this whole time, because they say things like he's been terrorizing the mountainside. Well, how has he been terrorizing the mountainside? Another one of those great plot holes was how did little Marie's father know she was, quote, murdered? Could she have just fallen in and drowned for all he knew? I mean,
true. Again, it's filmmaking for 1931, 2.5 hour epics, wasn't the the preferred choice of filmmaking.
Oh no, this movie's only 70 minutes long. But I mean, in my opinion, you could have taken out some of those, German make merry with lederhosens dancing in the street for a little bit more focus on what the monster's been up to, especially to warrant this kind of reaction from a village.
Sure.
Kill me. All that. You stay here and take care of him. The rest follow me. Come on. Come on, quick. Come on, boy.
Did Frankenstein ever admit to the town that he created this thing?
Not on film, he didn't. Okay. So, I mean...
Because I was about to say, they're all very gung-ho to follow his lead when they should be lynching him.
Are we about to get another iconic standoff between Colin Clive and Boris Karloff?
Mm-hmm.
Monster and creator.
This Frankenstein. That way.
Right on the flame.
Just landed into the flame.
Yeah. Save the shot, buddy. Save the shot.
Pain is temporary, film is forever. Speaking of pain.
Yeah, according to Sarah Karloff, Boris's daughter, as during this scene, couldn't just get it right. So many takes were taking of Boris carrying Colin Clive up this hill on his shoulder, which unfortunately led to a lifelong struggle with a bad back, many surgeries.
Yeah.
Really ailed him for the rest of his life.
Especially this upcoming shot of him going up the ladder. He looks bigger thanks to the padding in his costume. But remember that gaunt figure you saw on the table in the laboratory? That's Boris at this time in his life. And Colin Clive's just giving him dead weight.
Where the hell did they find a log?
It's a forest.
There's no... we'll let it go.
I mean, they obviously chopped a tree down with an axe so they can make a log to bust down the door. Of course, my obvious question is, why don't you use the axe on the door?
Could.
It's all wood. But hey, we love this movie, so we can't.
Hey, listen.
Suspension of
disbelief.
disbelief.
One of the greatest of all time.
This is probably my favorite shot of the movie.
Final face-off.
Mm-hmm. Another iconic set, the windmill. Which again, this was all added for this film.
And there goes Dr. Frankenstein.
You mean a dummy?
Dr. Frankenstein, damn it.
Okay. And he's totally dead, right?
So you think.
Mm-hmm.
Frankenstein. Bring him down to the village and let's take him home.
And the windmill's on fire, and this looks like it may be the end for old Boris.
Oh, yeah, totally.
What a great set.
Yeah. Again, and something that's totally created for the movie, because none of this was in the novel or anything prior. I hate this tacked on happy ending.
Well, again, for an audience, a 1931 audience, you just spent an hour shocking the shit out of them. You got to give them something to go home and smile about. And it's not a nightmare.
I mean, thank God.
So how do we do this? Frederick Krueger with more alcohol.
Yeah. I mean, they did retcon this in Bride of Frankenstein, thankfully.
Yeah. And I love how he's going to force all the maids to watch him drink it himself.
Oh, yeah, because, the good stuff is, too good for them.
It's wasted on them, as he put it.
Yep.
As I said before, I say again, here's to a son to the house of Frankenstein.
And as always, a good cast is worth repeating, and now we finally see that the monster was indeed, in fact, played by the legendary Boris Karloff.
Oh, yes.
Colin Clive as Henry Frankenstein, Meg Clark as Elizabeth, John Bowles as Victor Mortz, Edward Van Sloan as Dr. Waldman, Frederick Krueger as Baron Frankenstein, Dwight Frye as Fritz, Lionel Barrymore as Burgermeister, and
Little Maria.
And Little Maria.
And Little Maria.
Well, Psycho Nation, this was a different format. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope we weren't too boring and too annoying during this commentary.
But a good movie is worth rewatching.
Yes, so whether you watch this movie with us talking over it or you watch it on your own, go watch this movie. It is not only a horror classic, it's one of cinema's masterpieces.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, we go back to Chucky. Don't forget, with not one, not two, not three, but 4 movies in one show, Bride, Seed, Cult, and Curse.
It's going to be a big, long show. We'll try to keep it under 4 hours, though.
And then from there, we'll go on to the remake, and we'll finally put the Cabbage Patch Doll from hell to rest and move on to bigger and better things. Thank you again so much for listening. Thank you for sticking with us during the name and brand change.
And once again, follow us on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Email us. We want to hear from you, and we can't wait to show you everything we got coming.
See you next week. This is the Scarifyer Podcast.
I'm the Gov.
I'm the Ace.